First Contact. The interstellar diplomatic event buzzed with anticipation aboard the neutral space station, Orbiters, as delegates from various galaxies arrived. Each quadrant of the station was awash with colors and sounds distinctive to the cultures they represented. At the human delegation, Jack Preston stood uneasily, adjusting his translator device. His apprehension wasn't the grandeur of the event, but the presence of one species in particular, the Krillians. Jack, a seasoned diplomat, was tall and carried a perpetually thoughtful expression, his hair just beginning to gray at the temples. Beside him, his colleague and friend, Dr. Luis Alvarez, clapped him on the back. "Nervous, Jack?" Luis teased lightly, his eyes scanning the crowd for any signs of their Krillian counterparts. "A bit," Jack admitted. "I've read the briefs, seen the vids. Krillians are intimidating. It's those stories about their strength." Luis laughed, adjusting his glasses. "Come on, it's all just first contact jitters. They're here for the same reasons we are, peace and partnership." Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of the Krillian delegation. The crowd parted slightly, allowing the group to move forward with an almost regal bearing. The Krillians were indeed imposing, towering over most other species, their skin a shimmering blue. Their eyes glowed softly under the station's lights, surveying the room with a calm collectiveness. Leading them was Ashera, whose presence commanded attention. Her height and muscular build were typical of her species, yet it was her composed, almost serene demeanor that set her apart. She approached the human delegation, her translator device pinned neatly to her collar. "Greetings, I am Ashera of Kerol," she announced in a voice that resonated with a calm authority. "I look forward to fruitful discussions with all of you." Jack stepped forward, extending a hand, a human gesture of peace. "Jack Preston, it's an honor to meet you." Ashera's hand enveloped his, and her grip was firm yet careful. "The honor is shared, Jack Preston. I am eager to understand more about your people." Dr. Alvarez joined them, introducing himself. "And I am Dr. Luis Alvarez. I specialize in xenobiology. Perhaps, Ashera, you could enlighten us about Krillian physiology sometime during our conference." With a nod, Ashera replied, "That would be most agreeable. Understanding is the foundation of cooperation, after all." As other delegates mingled around them, Jack, Luis, and Ashera discussed various topics, ranging from technology to art forms, discovering mutual interests and differences. Jack found himself increasingly fascinated, not just by Ashera's knowledge, but by her perspective on universal coexistence. "So, Ashera, what's your impression of Earth art?" Jack asked, as Luis brought over a tablet displaying images of famous Earth paintings. "Your art speaks of a planet rich with emotion and conflict, yet striving for beauty," Ashera observed, her eyes scanning the images. "It is very different from Krillian art, which often focuses on harmony and the collective. Perhaps, during this conference, we could arrange an exchange of artists between our worlds." "That sounds like a wonderful idea," Luis said, his enthusiasm evident. "Art is a window to the soul of a culture. What better way to understand each other?" As the conversation flowed, Jack's initial fear began to dissipate, replaced by a budding respect and curiosity. He was beginning to see not the formidable Krillian of his briefings, but a potential friend and ally in Ashera. Their dialogue was soon interrupted by the announcement of the opening ceremony. Ashera offered her arms to both men, a Krillian gesture of camaraderie. "Shall we face these new beginnings together?" she proposed, her voice imbued with a genuine warmth. Jack and Luis accepted, and as they walked side by side towards the grand hall, Jack felt a surge of optimism. The event had just begun, and already it promised to reshape his view of the galaxy. Chapter 2. Breaking the Ice. The cultural exchange workshop was in full swing aboard the orbiter's station. Panels of shimmering fabric divided the room, each section dedicated to different species showcasing their traditions and technology. In the human section, Jack and Luis, alongside Ashera, were setting up their presentation materials. A large holographic display flickered to life, illustrating the timelines of human and Krillian history side by side. Luis was fiddling with the hologram settings, trying to synchronize the timelines accurately. "I never get these settings right on the first try," he muttered, half to himself. Ashera watched with interest. "Technology often has a will of its own, doesn't it?" she remarked, her voice tinged with amusement. Jack laughed, adjusting a model of an ancient Earth satellite. "You could say that. Sometimes I think it likes to test our patience." The room buzzed with delegates from various planets, each group eager to learn about the others. A nearby Andorian delegate peered curiously at the human setup. "Is this a model of your early space exploration tools?" he inquired, pointing at the satellite model. "Yes, it is," Jack responded, pleased with the interest. "This is a replica of the Sputnik satellite, one of Earth's first steps into space exploration." "What about Andoria? How did your people begin exploring the stars?" The Andorian, a lean figure with bright eyes, animatedly described their first space-bound crafts, propelled by energy fields rather than conventional fuel. As they spoke, Ashera took notes on a digital pad, her eyes never leaving the Andorian. Luis, having finally fixed the hologram, clapped his hands. "There we go. Now, let's walk everyone through it." He gestured to the gathered crowd. "This hologram represents key moments in both human and Krillian history where our paths have led to discoveries and conflicts, and ultimately, growth." As the presentation commenced, Jack took the lead, narrating the human timeline with Ashera supplementing from the Krillian perspective. They highlighted the parallel evolution of technology and governance, which sparked discussions among the audience about similarities and differences in societal development. A Murathan delegate, covered in iridescent scales, raised a hand. "How have your societies managed conflicts among diverse groups within your populations?" Jack exchanged a glance with Ashera before answering. "Through dialogue and legal frameworks designed to respect diversity while maintaining unity. It's an ongoing process, and not without its challenges." Ashera nodded, adding, "On Carol, we focus on collective decision-making. It's slower, but it ensures that all voices are heard before a decision is reached. It's fascinating to see how humans handle these issues." The session evolved into an interactive discussion, with delegates asking questions and sharing their own experiences. Jack and Ashera facilitated the dialogue, ensuring everyone had a chance to contribute. As the workshop drew to a close, the panel was deemed a great success. Many delegates lingered, exchanging contact information and promising to share more about their cultures. Luis, packing up the equipment, turned to Ashera with a grin. "How about we celebrate our successful presentation? There's a galactic cuisine expo in the next sector over. We could all grab something to eat, learn a bit more about each other's food." Ashera's eyes lit up. "I would like that very much. Food is another profound way to share one's culture." The trio made their way to the expo, discussing everything from the day's successes to plans for future collaborations. As they walked, Jack felt a sense of accomplishment and camaraderie that went beyond simple diplomatic relations. He was making new friends, bridging galaxies one conversation at a time. Chapter 3: Unexpected Partnership. The morning on Orbiters brought a new challenge, an announcement that a joint mission to a newly discovered planet was being assembled, and teams from different species were encouraged to participate. Over breakfast in the communal dining area, Jack, Luis, and Ashera discussed the potential of joining the mission. "So, They're looking for mixed teams to foster better interspecies relationships while exploring? Luis asked, spooning a portion of what looked like glowing blue porridge, a popular Andorian dish. That's right, Jack confirmed, scanning the mission brief on his tablet. They believe diverse perspectives will help in understanding the new planet's ecosystem and potential for colonization. Ashera looked intrigued. Krillians value discovery. I believe participating in this mission could serve as a foundation for deeper cooperation between our worlds. Luis nodded enthusiastically. Imagine the scientific data we could gather. Plus, working closely with Krillians in a field setting would provide invaluable insights. Jack smiled, feeling the excitement build. Then it's settled. Let's register our team. What should we call ourselves? After a playful debate, they settled on the Galactic Pioneers. They completed their registration and began preparing for the mission. The next few days were a whirlwind of briefings, gear checks, and training sessions. The team learned to operate a variety of scientific instruments and survival equipment, often leading to humorous mishaps and light-hearted banter. Finally, the day arrived. The team, along with other mixed-species groups, boarded the shuttle that would take them to the planet, tentatively named Zephyria. The journey was short, and soon they were descending through the vibrant green clouds of Zephiria's atmosphere. Once landed, they set up a base camp near a vast forest that teemed with unknown flora and fauna. Ashera and Jack led a small group to collect samples, while Luis coordinated the camp setup and data logging activities. As they ventured into the forest, Jack marveled at the biodiversity. Look at these plants. This one has leaves that shimmer when the light hits them. Ashera, equipped with a scanner, analyzed the plant. It's not just visual. My readings suggest these leaves are highly efficient at photosynthesis. This could be groundbreaking for agricultural tech. Their exploration was suddenly interrupted by a rustling nearby. Instinctively, Ashera positioned herself in front of Jack, her eyes scanning the dense foliage. A creature, resembling a cross between a reptile and a bird, emerged, its feathers a brilliant display of colors. It eyed them curiously but made no aggressive moves. Luis, who had followed them quietly, whispered excitedly, "It's beautiful. This could be the first of many unique species we discover here." Jack took out his camera, slowly approaching the creature. "Hey there, we're not going to harm you. We're just here to learn." To their surprise, the creature chirped softly, tilting its head as if studying Jack. Ashera looked on, a gentle smile playing on her lips. "It seems you have a way with alien creatures, Jack." Their successful interaction with the creature was the highlight of their first day, and they returned to camp with samples and data. That evening, as they shared their findings with other teams, Jack felt a profound sense of pride and connection with his team. Luis, looking over the data, clapped his hands together. "We are making history here, my friends. Tomorrow, let's explore the northern ridge. I saw some interesting geological formations when we landed." Ashera agreed, her eyes sparkling with the thrill of discovery. "Every step on this planet brings us closer together. Let's keep this momentum going." As they retired for the night, Jack lay in his sleeping pod, the sounds of Zephiria's nocturnal life a soft backdrop. His last thoughts before sleep were of the unexpected friendships forming, the discoveries yet to come, and the shared future that seemed more promising with each passing day. Chapter 4. A Night Under Alien Stars. As the sun dipped below the horizon of Zephyria, casting long shadows across the makeshift camp, the cool night air brought with it an atmosphere of tranquility and reflection. Luis was setting up a portable stove, determined to cook a meal with some of their rationed ingredients mixed with safe, edible plants they had discovered earlier. Jack and Ashera returned from a late survey of the surrounding area, their boots covered in the thick, blue mud that lined the riverbank. "Smells good, Luis. What's on the menu tonight?" Jack called out, clapping the mud from his boots before stepping into the communal tent. "Ah, my friend, tonight we dine on what I'm going to call Zephyrian stew," Luis announced with a flourish. "A mix of our standard rations and a couple of those tuber-like plants Ashera found. Edible and nutritious, according to our scans." Ashera chuckled as she washed her hands in a small basin outside the tent. "I'm curious to see how you've managed to make our rations taste different this time." Joining them around the portable stove, they each took their portions and sat on the collapsible chairs, looking up at the night sky. The stars seemed different here, brighter and somehow closer. As they ate, Luis pointed upwards. "You see that constellation? That's not visible from Earth. I've been recording different patterns each night. I think it could be useful for navigation if we're going to make regular trips here." Jack followed his gaze, appreciating the unfamiliar celestial scene. "It's amazing, isn't it? Makes you feel both insignificant and incredibly important at the same time." The conversation shifted towards their findings from the day. Ashera brought out a few samples of rock and plant life, spreading them on a portable table. "These samples contain compounds that aren't recorded in any of our databases. We might be looking at new materials for medicine or even energy production." Luis examined a rock with a glowing vein through it. "Imagine the possibilities. This could revolutionize how we generate power. Maybe we could start testing some small samples tomorrow with the portable lab kit." As the night deepened, Jack took a moment to appreciate his companions. Turning to Ashera, he said, "This planet, it's like a bridge between our worlds. Every discovery here tells a story of what we could achieve together." Ashera smiled, her eyes reflecting the starlight. "It does. And every night under these stars, I feel we are writing those stories together." The conversation gradually became more personal. Jack shared tales of his childhood on Earth, his family, and his dreams of space exploration. Ashera listened intently, her gaze softening. "I never imagined, when meeting humans, that I'd hear such stories. On Kael, we are more reserved about our personal lives. But sharing like this, it's refreshing." Encouraged by her interest, Jack asked, "What about you, Ashera? What's it like growing up on Kael?" Ashera paused, considering her words. "It's structured. We are part of a collective, always. Individualism isn't encouraged. But I've always been curious about the galaxy, about other cultures. That's what brought me here." As the fire from the stove died down to embers, Luis stood up, stretching. "I think I'm going to turn in. We have a big day tomorrow." Jack nodded, and as Luis left, he turned back to Ashera. "Thanks for sharing that with me. It means a lot." Ashera reached over, her hand briefly touching his. "Thank you, Jack, for listening, for understanding." They sat together for a while longer, watching the stars and talking softly, the boundaries of their worlds blurring into the night. As they returned to their respective sleeping pods, Jack felt a profound connection, not just to a new alien world, but to a friend who was once an enigma from a distant place. Chapter 5. Deepening Bonds. The mid-morning sun cast a golden glow over the rolling hills and thick, blue-leafed vegetation around the camp. Jack was busy setting up a small portable cooking station, his sleeves rolled up as he prepared ingredients from their supply crates. Beside him, Luis was organizing their findings into neat compartments, while Ashera returned from the edge of the forest carrying a bundle of freshly harvested plants that had been cleared as edible. "Did you get the spices I mentioned?" Luis asked, glancing over at Jack's growing pile of ingredients. "Yep, though they're pretty basic," Jack replied, holding up a small container. "Salt, pepper, and whatever this thing is. He shook a vial of bright orange powder. "Smells a bit like citrus." Asherah approached, setting the bundle of plants on the prep table. "I scanned those earlier. They're safe, and their flavor profile resembles earth spinach." "Perfect," Jack said, reaching for a knife. "How about we try making a version of spaghetti, but with these alien greens instead of pasta?" Luis raised an eyebrow. "Spaghetti without spaghetti? That's bold." "Trust me," Jack said with a grin. "We're in uncharted culinary territory here." As Jack chopped, sliced, and stirred, the three exchanged stories. Asherah described a Krillian feast day, where entire communities gathered to share a single, intricately prepared dish. "It's not about indulgence," she explained, watching Jack cook. "It's about unity. Everyone contributes an ingredient, and the resulting meal symbolizes our shared purpose." Luis, leaning against the table, nodded. "That's beautiful. On Earth, food often brings people together too, but it sounds like your feast day is on another level. Jack, do you remember that one holiday dinner at the embassy? The ambassador insisted on making her grandmother's casserole recipe, and it ended up being completely inedible." Jack laughed. "Oh, I remember. It was like chewing on bricks." Asherah's eyes brightened with amusement. "Was it truly that bad?" "It was," Jack replied. "But we all ate it anyway. We didn't want to offend her. Sometimes the gesture is more important than the result." Asherah considered this. "It's similar to our custom, then. The meaning behind the act matters more than the food itself." Soon, the smell of their improvised meal filled the air. Jack plated the dish, topped it with a sprinkle of the citrusy spice, and handed a portion to each of them. "Okay, moment of truth," Jack said as they took their first bites. Luis chewed thoughtfully. "It's actually not bad. Kind of reminds me of those fusion dishes they serve at the lunar food markets." Asherah nodded slowly. "This is delightful. The flavors are distinct yet harmonious. You might have a talent for combining our ingredients." Jack feigned a bow. "Thank you, thank you. I'll be opening the first intergalactic bistro next." As they ate, the conversation shifted to their work on Zephyria. Luis shared his latest theories about the geological formations, while Asherah explained the potential medicinal properties of the local flora. "I think we should focus on that river system next," Luis suggested. "The sediment there could tell us more about this planet's history." Jack agreed. "Sounds good. Maybe we'll discover something completely unexpected." Asherah smiled at their optimism. "With the three of us working together, I believe we will." After the meal, they packed their gear and headed toward the river. The journey through the forest was filled with light-hearted banter, shared discoveries, and occasional laughter at Luis's ongoing struggle to keep his boots from getting stuck in the mud. By the time they reached the river, the day's sunlight reflected off the gently flowing water, making it sparkle like liquid glass. They collected samples, analyzed readings, and recorded notes, working seamlessly as a team. Jack found himself glancing at Asherah now and then, appreciating her steady focus and calm guidance. When the work was done, they sat on a fallen log by the riverbank, catching their breath. Luis took out a small camera, snapping a few photos of the landscape. "You know," Luis said, scrolling through the pictures, "when we first signed up for this mission, I wasn't sure what to expect. But I'm glad we're out here together." "Agreed," Jack said, leaning back against the log. "It feels right. Like we're building something that'll last." Asherah placed her hands on her knees, gazing out at the horizon. "It is a unique experience, finding common ground among such differences. I am grateful to have both of you by my side." Jack smiled. and we're glad to have you with us." The moment was quiet, but filled with unspoken understanding. As the sun dipped lower in the sky, casting everything in a warm, golden hue, the three sat together, sharing the sense of accomplishment and growing friendship that had developed over their days on this uncharted world. Chapter 6. The Crisis. The wind howled through the makeshift camp as an unexpected storm rolled in, dark clouds swirling above. Jack hurried to secure their equipment while Luis called out instructions, his voice barely audible over the escalating roar. "Jack, grab the sample crates and get them under the tarp," Luis shouted, pointing toward the collection of geological specimens they'd gathered over the last few days. "I'm on it," Jack yelled back, darting toward the crates. The wind whipped at his jacket, nearly knocking him off balance. Ashera emerged from the research tent, her tall figure braced against the gusts. She moved with purpose, carrying a reinforced case of medical supplies. "Luis, the comm unit's down. I can't get a signal to the station." Luis grimaced. "Figures. We'll just have to ride it out. Help Jack secure the equipment before we lose anything." Nodding, Ashera sprinted to Jack's side. Together, they wrestled the heavy crates into a more sheltered spot. The two worked quickly, their movements synchronized as if they'd been a team for years rather than just days. "Got it," Jack said, securing the last crate. "What's next?" Before Luis could answer, a massive gust tore through the camp, snapping one of the support poles holding up their main shelter. It crashed down toward Jack, who tried to move but was a second too slow. He managed to throw up an arm in defense, but the heavy pole caught him across the side, sending him sprawling into the mud. "Jack!" Ashera shouted, rushing to his side. Luis ran over as well, his boots slipping in the slick ground. "Is he okay?" Jack groaned, trying to push himself upright. "I'm fine, I think," he muttered, though his voice betrayed his pain. Ashera knelt beside him, her hands gentle but firm as she checked him over. "You're not fine. Stay still for a moment." Her tone brooked no argument. Jack complied, wincing as she probed along his ribs. "You've got some nasty bruising. Possibly a fractured rib. Luis, hand me the med kit." Luis retrieved the kit and knelt beside them. "Here," he said, passing it over. Ashera worked quickly, applying a stabilizing wrap around Jack's torso. Her movements were steady and efficient, her touch reassuring. Jack watched her face as she worked, noting the focused intensity in her expression. "You've done this before," he said, his voice a bit strained. She gave him a small smile. "First aid training is standard for Krillian exploration teams. We are often in situations where we must care for one another." Luis stayed close, handing Ashera supplies as needed and offering words of encouragement. "You're in good hands, Jack. I think she's better at this than I would be." Jack grunted a laugh, though it ended in a wince. "Yeah, I can tell." Once she finished, Ashera sat back on her heels. "You'll be sore for a while, but you should heal without complications. Still, you need rest." "Rest? With this storm going on?" Jack asked, glancing around at their chaotic camp. The wind had eased slightly, but rain still lashed the ground, and scattered equipment lay strewn about. Luis stood up, brushing off his hands. "I'll handle what's left out here. You get him inside the shelter." Ashera nodded, helping Jack to his feet. "Come on. You'll feel better once you're lying down." Jack reluctantly let her guide him into the one remaining intact tent. Inside, the air was calmer, muffled by the thick fabric. Ashera helped him settle onto a cot and draped a blanket over him. "You didn't have to do all that," Jack said after a moment, his voice quieter now that they were out of the storm. "I could have managed." Ashera raised an eyebrow, her expression serious. "You are part of this team, Jack. Of course I helped. Any of us would do the same for you." Luis poked his head in briefly, his face streaked with mud and water. "The rest is secure. I'll keep watch out here and try to get the comm unit working again once this storm lets up." "Thanks, Luis," Jack said. "Be careful out there." Luis gave a quick nod before disappearing into the rain. As the storm continued to rage outside, Jack lay on the cot, his body aching but his mind strangely at ease. Ashera sat nearby, checking her notes and occasionally glancing his way. "I meant what I said," she added, her voice softer now. "We're a team, Jack. We look after each other." Jack looked at her, seeing the sincerity in her eyes. "Thanks, Ashera. That means a lot." They sat in companionable silence, the sounds of the storm fading into the background. Despite the pain in his side, Jack felt a new sense of trust and connection with Ashera. The storm had been a trial, but it had also brought them closer together, further proof that they could face whatever challenges lay ahead as a united team. Chapter 7. Recovery and Revelations. The medical bay aboard orbiters hummed with quiet efficiency. Jack, propped up on a cushioned recliner, winced as the station's automated treatment device scanned his ribcage. Nearby, Luis leaned against a console, juggling a cup of coffee and a datapad. "You're a lucky guy, you know," Luis said. "A fractured rib could have been much worse out there." Jack rolled his eyes. "Lucky is not the word I'd use, Luis. I feel like I've been run over by a shuttle." Luis chuckled. "You've been worse. Remember that time you got tangled in those magnetic nets during that salvage op? I thought you'd be glowing in the dark for weeks." Jack managed a laugh despite the ache in his side. "I guess I have a habit of getting banged up." The door slid open, and Ashera entered. She carried a small container, her strides steady and purposeful. Seeing Jack awake, she approached with a nod. "I thought I'd find you here. How are you feeling?" "Better," Jack said, sitting up slightly. "Thanks to you. Luis said you did a great job patching me up." Ashara's expression softened. "I'm glad to hear that. I brought you some herbal tea. It's a Krillian remedy that helps with pain and relaxation." Luis glanced at the container in her hands. "What's in it?" "Anything that'll turn his skin blue." Ashera raised an eyebrow, her voice calm but firm. "No, Luis. It's perfectly safe. And it might actually do him some good." Jack accepted the tea with a small smile. "Thanks, Ashera. I appreciate it." As Jack sipped, Ashera sat down on a nearby stool, her posture relaxed. "You should recover quickly. The rib wasn't displaced, and the scans show no internal damage." Luis's comlink buzzed, drawing his attention. "Looks like I need to check on something in the lab. Don't get into too much trouble, you two." With that, he left, leaving Jack and Ashera alone. Jack set the tea aside after a few sips. "You didn't have to come all the way down here. But it's good to see you." Ashera tilted her head slightly. "It's important to me that you're well. We've been through a lot together, and you matter, to this mission and to me." Jack's chest tightened at her words, though he tried not to show it. "I didn't expect to find this kind of connection on a mission like this. It's surprising, in a good way." Ashara's gaze was steady. "Perhaps that's what makes it meaningful. Unexpected connections often have the strongest impact." They sat quietly for a moment, the hum of the medical equipment filling the room. Then Jack broke the silence. "I've been thinking about what happens next. When we leave this station, when we go back to our respective worlds, will this," he gestured between them, "just fade away? Asherah considered his question carefully. It doesn't have to. It will require effort, yes, and understanding. But I believe that what we've built is worth preserving. Jack leaned back against the recliner, feeling a flicker of hope. I'd like that. I'd like to keep this going. Asherah nodded. Then we will. Before long, the medical device signaled that its scan was complete. A holographic report appeared, confirming Jack's progress. He would need a few more days of rest, but his recovery was on track. Asherah stood. I'll let you rest now. If you need anything, you know where to find me. Jack gave her a grateful smile. Thanks, Asherah, for everything. As she left the room, Jack let out a long breath. His body still ached, but his mind felt lighter. Their conversation had answered questions he didn't even realize he had. No matter what challenges lay ahead, he knew he wouldn't be facing them alone. Chapter 8. A New Beginning. The shuttle touched down softly on Earth's surface, the muted hum of the engines fading into a gentle silence. Jack was the first to step out, the familiar gravity pulling him back into the rhythms of his home planet. The air was crisp, carrying a faint hint of the ocean that lay just beyond the horizon. He turned back to offer Asherah a hand as she descended. She hesitated for only a moment before accepting his gesture, her eyes scanning the alien landscape of Earth's Pacific coast. "So this is Earth," she said, her voice calm but touched with curiosity. Jack grinned. "This is just a tiny corner of it. Wait until you see the rest." Luis followed them out, stretching his arms and squinting at the sunlight. "Feels good to be back. I need a real cup of coffee." "I'll make sure you get one," Jack replied, leading them down a stone path toward a small coastal village where his family owned a house. As they walked, Asherah glanced at the flora lining the path, her fingers brushing against the leaves of a low-hanging branch. "These plants remind me of some we encountered on Zephyria, though the colors are different." Jack glanced over his shoulder, noting her interest. "We'll have time to explore later. First, we'll get settled." Luis, lagging a step behind, added, "And by settled, Jack means he's going to make you try something called clam chowder. Fair warning, it's not everyone's favorite." Asherah tilted her head. "I am always willing to try new things." The house came into view, a modest, weathered structure with a wide porch that faced the sea. Jack opened the door, ushering them inside. The interior was simple but inviting, with warm wood paneling and large windows that bathed the rooms in natural light. "This place has been in my family for generations," Jack said, motioning for them to take a seat in the living room. "It's not fancy, but it's home." Asherah settled onto the sofa, her posture poised. "It's peaceful here." Luis was already peering into the kitchen. "Found the coffee maker. I'll be brewing some if anyone wants." "Go for it," Jack said, sitting down across from Asherah. He took a deep breath, letting the familiar scents and sounds of the house ease the tension he hadn't realized he was carrying. "So what happens now?" Asherah asked, her gaze steady. Jack leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. "Now we figure out how to build on what we started. I don't have all the answers yet, but I know I don't want this to end here." Asherah regarded him thoughtfully. "I have always believed that understanding is the first step toward progress. Perhaps we begin by simply continuing to learn from each other." Jack nodded. "And maybe we find ways to share that understanding with others. Bring more people into this. Humans, Krillians, and anyone else willing to listen." Luis returned with a cup of coffee, joining them in the conversation. "We'll need a solid plan. Maybe start small, introduce Asherah to a few local communities, share our story, and then work our way up to larger audiences." Asherah considered this. A gradual approach seems wise. Cultural exchange requires patience and mutual respect. Jack smiled. I couldn't agree more. Over the next few days, they settled into a routine. They visited nearby towns, meeting with local leaders and community groups, sharing tales of their experiences on Zephyria. Jack took Asherah to his favorite spots: an old lighthouse perched on a rocky cliff, a bustling farmer's market filled with vibrant produce and handmade goods, and a quiet cove where the waves lapped gently at the shore. As they stood at the edge of the cove one evening, watching the sun sink into the horizon, Asherah spoke softly. I did not expect Earth to feel so familiar. Jack looked at her, intrigued. How so? She turned to him, her eyes reflecting the colors of the setting sun. The sense of connection I see here, between people, between the land and the sea, it reminds me of certain places on Care. There are differences, yes, but also parallels. It feels welcoming. Jack felt a warmth in her words, a sense of belonging that had been growing between them since their first meeting. I'm glad you feel that way. I've come to see Carl through your eyes, and it's made me appreciate Earth in new ways too. Their conversations deepened as they shared more about their cultures, dreams, and the challenges they faced. Luis joined them often, offering his humor and insights, making their bond as a group even stronger. One evening, after a particularly lively dinner where Asherah had successfully convinced Luis to try a Krillian dish she'd prepared, Jack took her aside. They stood on the porch, the cool night air carrying the sound of waves and the faint chatter of a distant bonfire. I just want to say, Jack began, hesitating for a moment before continuing, having you here has changed how I see everything. This planet, our mission, the future. I'm glad you're here. Asherah looked at him, her gaze steady yet gentle. And I am grateful for this opportunity. I've learned so much from you and Luis. Together, we are stronger than I imagined. Jack smiled. Then we'll keep going. Together. As the days turned into weeks, their efforts bore fruit. More and more people became interested in the story of their partnership, curious about the possibilities that arose from interspecies collaboration. They built bridges not only between Earth and Keol, but between countless other cultures, laying the foundation for a future where differences were celebrated rather than feared. And through it all, Jack, Asherah, and Luis remained at the heart of it, friends, partners, and pioneers in a universe that suddenly felt a lot smaller and infinitely more connected.